Hey, Bastish BF for 64K, and welcome to another episode of the Unconverted. So today we're going to have a look at another 3 games that never got conversions to the Commodore 64. So 2 of them are conversions of Atari 2600 games and 1 is an arcade game. And so just like the first episode, all 3 of these games were done by Arlosoft and a guy named Nick Sherman. And the 3 games we're going to look at today are Galaga, originally released in 1981 by Namco in the arcades, Megamania, released by Activision in 1982 on the Atari 2600, and Thunderground, released in 1983 by Sega, also on the 2600. So let's start looking at all 3 of these releases, plus a brief look at the original versions. Galaga was originally released in the arcades in 1981 and was the sequel to Galaxian, which was, up until that point, Namco's most successful arcade game they had ever produced. It was a simple single-screen shoot-'em-up with you taking out hordes of alien bugs. The combination of extremely colorful graphics, great sound effects, and a catchy little title tune, plus the fact that the bad guys could actually steal your lives with a tractor beam, made it stand out from the already saturated single-screen blast fest that had invaded the arcades after the massive success of Space Invaders. Why the C64 never got a conversion is a bit of a mystery, especially considering it got a port of the much more obscure Gapless in 1988, which is also part of the Galaxian series. Nick based his conversion though off the NES version, which was released in 1985 and is an excellent 8-bit rendition of the arcade game. The C64 sticks pretty close to the NES incarnation, with some pretty good graphics sticking quite close to the arcade. Although the sound is not quite there, it's just a little bit off, but different sound chips could make this a pretty difficult task to replicate exactly. It plays quite well though, it moves fast and is very responsive. I like the fact that it's got the 2-player cooperative mode, which is pulled off really well, and I'd highly recommend trying that out. The game features a splash screen and bonus stages, as well as the bug's tractor beam attack, and is a nice overall version of the arcade. It's not perfect, but the C64 never had this game, and now it does. Sure, there are a lot of C64 clone games out there, but it's nice to play a version of the arcade, although still unofficial, on the old C64. Finally. Next is Megamania, released in 1982 by Activision on the Atari 2600. It was another in a long line of Steve Cartwright hits he did for the company, which also included Frostbite and GB Air Rally, a personal favorite of mine on the C64 and a really cool Amiga version as well. The game was another single-screen shooter affair that took most of its cues from Sega's arcade game Astro Blaster, which came out a year earlier. It's basically a clone game of that, with some differences obviously. You have to blast waves of enemies as they descend down the screen towards you in varying bizarre patterns. The game had a strange hypnotic rhythm to it, that if you could get the rhythm going, you would feel invincible, and was, for me at least, one of the coolest features of this game. It was simple and played really well, the hallmarks of the early days of Activision. Nick was actually inspired by Antonio Savona's collection of Activision conversions to the C64, and has said that this made him decide to do Megamania. And yes, it's another fun port that gets lots of things right, but doesn't quite match up to the original. On the positive aspects, it gets the graphics practically exactly the same as the original, as well as adds this nifty little title loader screen. It has the options to have curved bullets, auto-fire, and such as the 2600 game. The sound effects are also quite good, but when playing both versions back to back, the 2600 sounds much chunkier and better. Gameplay feels almost the same, but I found it really hard to get that timing rhythm down. Maybe the speed is just slightly different, which ends up giving it a bit of a different feel overall. But if you've never played the original, then this is going to be quite a fun, simple blaster that you'll definitely have some fun with. But if you're a really big fan of the original, you'll definitely notice the subtle differences. Still, overall, it's another good, if slightly flawed version of the original. And the final game is called Thunderground, released by Sega in 1983 on the Atari 2600 as well. I'd always thought this game was based on an obscure Sega arcade game that I just never played, but it wasn't after all, and was specifically designed by Sega Electronics for the 2600. The game itself was a bit of a cross between Namco's Dig Dug and Atari's Combat, where you're in an underground tank burrowing your way towards a bunch of nuclear missile bases that you have to destroy before they launch. You also have to deal with the tanks guarding the bases. The levels get bigger and more elaborate as you go on, with the tanks becoming more relentless in their pursuit of destroying you. Also hidden on each level is an item that if you collect it, will boost your overall score for the level. According to Nick himself, it took him about 3 days to do this conversion, which even with the game's simplicity is an impressive task to pull off. Out of his 3 conversions here, I actually enjoyed Thunderground the most. It's very accurate to the original, and the gameplay is actually quite addictive, and I came back to this game many times to see how far I could get. The controls are also spot on, with nice simple graphics and some good sound effects, making this an awesome addition to the C64 games that weren't. Overall, all these games are nice additions to the C64's library, and it's really cool to see people out there taking the time to contribute to the old Breadbox's legacy. None of these games are perfect conversions, but who said they have to be? I say well done to Olasoft and everybody out there producing C64 content in any form. And that's it for this nice little bunch of C64 conversions that we would have never seen. I'll leave a link to Olasoft's website so you can check out the games and download them. Thanks for joining me, Bastish B at 64K. I hope you had a good time, and if you can please like and subscribe, they'll be greatly appreciated, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.